Hello, I'm Jane Scobie, a sculptor and sound artist. This presentation, Sea Wall, was recorded during the Meta Nature exhibition. It covers my research into the strandline along the Wash in Norfolk, investigating the idea of deposition, both in the legal sense of witness and in the geographical sense of laying down sediment. I've been exploring how the Norfolk coast has been transformed by coastal management strategies focused on control of the sea, overlooking the essential dynamism and change which non-human inhabitants thrive on. I've been exploring the idea of deposition, both in the sense of bearing witness to what's happening, but also in the fact of sediment dropping, a geographical sense of deposition over time. So I've been very much thinking about the work of Susan Shipley and Sheila Sheikh and their ideas about testimony and enabling nature to represent itself and become part of the discussion in this whole zone, which is very much flooded all the time. The strand line, which is what I've been working on, is the line of debris when the sea drops and it loses energy, and it leaves this strand line which changes twice a day. And both the composition, what's in it, this is all from one beach where I've been working in Hull, and the positioning of it is like a bioindicator. So we've got the whelk, there's a lot of whelk fishing in Norfolk, and this is whelk egg, and there's a lot of sea urchins, and sometimes you'll find hundreds of sea urchins or hundreds of starfish, and this is bryozoan actually, so it's actually a community of animals. It looks like a seaweed, but it's actually this whole community which smells lemony when you walk down the beach. This is all around the Wash, and the Wash is that little niche of land. You know, I don't know whether you know the Wash, but you know the big bulge of East Anglia, and then that little niche of land, and that's where I've been working, and it's an alluvial area, and there's just huge sandbanks out at sea, and it's constantly moving around. So I think the strandline is also the metaphor, if you like, the coastline, which is constantly changing, but we've still got this idea, say we in the general term of the map, there is a line, and that is the barrier between the sea, and in North Norfolk there's sort of sea walls or sea defences almost all around the coast now, and it's because of this perception that we can hold a line, or there is this strong line, whereas of course it's constantly moving, and the creatures that live within the sea are constantly adapting to this change, and they're very good at it. So this piece here, all my fabrics are printed from material that kind of microscopic views of the sea. So these are things I found and then looked at under the microscope and then printed out. This is what I imagine the sea wall view, the perspective of the creatures living in. So when they're looking at the wall, all the different things that are there, and there's just such a multitude. It's very muted in colour because it really reflects the colour of the water and what's happening. But there's this incredible variety of inhabitants living just the other side of the beach that we hardly ever see, but are very present. Tentacular pieces, which are again inspired by the pincers and feet, marine mollusks. So this is very much, this colour here is from the sea urchin, and it's got at least 5 different pincers for feeding, cleaning and moving. There's this amazing mouth which golfs at the same time as grabbing, and that's been used a lot to speak to your work in robotics. It's called Aristotle's lantern, and he was the first person that studied them in Greece years ago. I've been experimenting with different fillings like sand, kind of connection, and also this kind of love-hate relationship people have with other creatures. I do quite a bit of performance work on the beach. I'm very much trying to take my work out into the public arena to have discussions about it. So this is a helmet which I made, which is a biological assemblage of all the things that you find in mermaid's purses, which is the shark egg, the different shells. This one's been drilled by a keel worm. There's so much there. There's 300 types of marine worm just in the Wash. It's completely amazing what there is. I think it's quite interesting to envisage this other world that people just don't see. This big piece is called the Ear of the Seas. In my former life, before I was practicing as much as I do now as an artist, I worked for international non-governmental organisations for quite a long time on disaster prevention and disaster mitigation based on community knowledge of their areas. So I was very interested in interviewing and speaking to harbour master and the cockle pickers and looking at the historical records as well as the relationship between people and mussels. King's Lynn was started as, because the salt pans started as an industry there to get the salt, and the 12 miles all around the coast of the whole of the UK is owned by the Crown, but access is by the landowners. We've still got the same landowners actually owning the access even today. Norfolk doesn't move on as a place. One thing that really struck me is that now we're at least trying to consider the quotas, the current fish quotas, talk about the amount of shellfish that birds need because it's a massive migratory area. So that seems quite a positive thing. It's not just human access, but it's bird access. They're talking about that in the equation. The harbour master very much worries about storm surges and he's concerned that we need to expand the salt marsh because that absorbs the energy and the quantity of water. And so when you get a massive surge, it's a really good way of alleviating pressure. He's concerned about pushing for that and also stopping the dredging of the sandbank sea because they're being dug up for all sorts of reasons, and obviously they're a barrier to stop, again, the tidal surges, which will only increase. Cell 3A, which is where we are, has got 3 approaches to coastal management. One is hold the line, which is the major one, of course, most of it, because there's so much development. The second one is do nothing. And the third one is retreat. I think, listen to the Ear of the Sea, and this is the sculpture which I've had on the beach, sitting next to people. It would be whispering retreat. I've been thinking about how to develop my practice, and I have 4 points in my methodology, and one I call washing, which is trying to make space for nature to represent itself. The other is claggy dean, which is Norfolk dialect for muddy sand, how we can speculate into the future, how we can imagine different scenarios, and I think that's quite a useful tool in conversations. And the other one is bristle, which is from the marine bristle worm, but it's about how to activate the work through performance or using sound and things like that. And the final one I think about quite a lot is to adjudicate, to hold people to account, and how my work can engage with the kind of conversations that are being had now. At the moment there's a discussion about building a barrage across the Wash to build a super highway. They want to build a container port on the Lincolnshire side of the Wash, and they want to have a motorway. They're dressing it up as a hydropower project. Even if it did produce some hydropower, it would quite soon silt up if you look at the analysis of similar projects in Amsterdam and other places. I'm trying to think about how we can move people on from the idea of the beach as a human playground or a dog exercise area and